To everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this wonderful training. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules, if we can use that word housekeeping for right now. So the link to the PowerPoint will be posted in the chat if you're interested in downloading it and following in the PowerPoint during the training. That link will be posted in the chat here soon. There will be a survey at the end of the training, and we'll also post that link. So we're asking you to please complete the survey at the end because we're interested in hearing from you when it comes to feedback. It just helps us in preparation for future trainings. If you would like a certificate of attendance, also, you're welcome to request that by emailing me, and my email address is vrichard@tamu.edu, and I can provide a certificate of attendance for you. That's by request only. During this presentation, there will be times for questions in about the middle of the presentation and then at the end. Any questions that you have, you're welcome to enter those in the chat box. And then the presenter will address those midway and then towards the end of the presentation. Once again, I don't know if everyone knows me. I forgot to introduce myself. I am Vanessa Richard. I am the program coordinator with the Capacity Building Project. I have with me today Eric Roberts, who is also part of the capacity building team. And if you've been attending our trainings by now, you should really know our faces. So thank you so much for joining us again today. And today's presenter is one of our own colleagues at the Center on Disability and Development at Texas A&M University, our own Dr. Jacqueline Turner. And she's going to introduce herself, and she's going to go ahead and kick this thing off for us today. So Jackie, here you are.
Hey, thank you. Of course, I'm already messing up my slide. I just want to say thank you for joining me today. I will add a disclaimer that I am on my last few days of working from home. And apparently today, I think every single person or household on my street has decided to repair their roof at the very same time on the very same day. So all I've been hearing all day is all kinds of hammering. So just know that if you hear something crazy, that's what it is. So they never cleared it with me, but apparently that's what's happening over here on my neck of the woods. I wanted to go ahead and I want to introduce myself a little bit. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. I am from McAllen. My family is from Mexico, and I'm hoping a lot of you know where McAllen is. It's amazing how many times I have to tell people where it is. And so if you all are close, or as I'm introducing myself, please introduce where you all are from, because I'd love to see. I know in Texas, there's a huge city or a huge state. Yay, look at that, all my Valley people. I did go to A&M as an undergraduate student. I finished my degree in sociology. I then went on to teach with Teach for America in New Orleans. That's when I actually started at, that makes me so happy right there. Hidalgo, Sherryland, yep. I was, at the time that I was in New Orleans, I was specializing as a special ed teacher. I was doing my training at that time. And I also, it's really important for me to add also that I was there pre-Katrina. So the landscape of education in New Orleans was very different than it is now, as was, I think, in Texas as well. So that might come up a little bit, is how much special education has changed and in terms of transition for our students. I came back to this area to attend A&M for my master's and PhD, and I was an elementary teacher and an inclusion teacher and a bilingual teacher in Bryan, and then eventually landed with the Center on Disability and Development. So I am very excited to be here today. I am working as the research specialist with the BEST project. And I am, let's see see if I do this right. Make sure I click right. Okay. Um, one of the things I want to make sure we do today is that everyone walks away with actual tools that we can kind of jump in and start using. I do know it's the summer, so I again want to thank you all so much. It is so hard to get educators and counselors and really just anybody together during the summer, especially right now. 4th of July is not quite here, but we're getting really close. Today, what we're going to do are basically 3 things. We're going to talk about really what self-determination is and how it's defined and generally accepted as a definition. We're also going to explain how self-determination is used with the BEST curriculum. And we're going to talk about that curriculum as well. And then we're going to talk about strategies to teach and practice self-determination within classrooms, or with, one-on-one with students, or really just in any opportunity you have to serve students and practice some of those skills. So in the chat, if you would, real quick, one of the questions I have for you is, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? If you think back to when you were a kid and someone asked you, what were you going to be when you grew up? What was that one thing you would tell people? And I very vividly remember, for me, it was being a pediatrician. And I knew I wanted to be a pediatrician. Not an educator, Sam. I love it. Very good. Yes. Teacher. We have teachers, lots of teachers, and not an educator. A tycoon. Yes. I love that, Denise. Psychiatrist, working with animals. Oh, I didn't know that, Eric. That's good. I knew I wanted to be a pediatrician, but then at some point, I think I also learned or was told that being a pediatrician included a lot of math, and it's going to be too hard for me. And then that kind of changed. I'm kind of sad that happened, because now I realize, well, maybe, I don't know, who knows? But a lot of the conversations that we have with people, or with students especially, can change that trajectory. So now I'm curious and we have a little poll, and if you could launch that, Eric, is your current job now in any way related to what you thought that was going to be, right? Like, is that in any way related? And for me, I think back, and even though I'm not a pediatrician, and I don't think I could ever be a pediatrician, to be real honest, my work has always been in serving kids, students, and being an advocate. So for me, it was very much still related, right? That's interesting. We have about half somewhat related to your job and somewhat not. And I bring that up because when we're working with students with disabilities, especially as they're getting really close to high school and graduation, we forget to talk about that. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we always have those conversations or those examples when people talk about, oh, you see, I kind of wanted it to be proven the other way, but it didn't work quite the way I wanted it with this poll. There's always, people will say the example, well, the student has this really lofty goal that they want to be, a football player. And it's probably never going to happen. And it's probably not, likely. And we're just going to go in a different direction. But we don't realize that there might be other reasons why this student loves football and wants to be in that realm, right? It could be something sports affiliated. It might be something serving athletes, or, there's always more to a story. And for me, I'm glad that I was able to maybe not be a pediatrician, but also serve kids and serve students. Although I do joke that because of my student loan debt, I probably should be a doctor at this point. At least if I were a medical doctor, I could eventually at some point, get out of it. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying. So before we go any further, I wanted to step back and kind of explain the BEST project. Basically what BEST is Texas Workforce Commission project funded a couple of years ago, where it was basically creating a curriculum for high school students with disabilities that would provide all of those things about jobs and job development and skills and everything into one space, right? And eventually it would be a curriculum within a TEA class in Texas for graduation. And so we're still a couple of steps, we're kind of in the process of working on that. But what we are working on for sure is that curriculum that would eventually take care of a number of these employability skills, including self-determination. So with that said, I have a couple of slides here about the the background about BEST, a lot of research. You all know that there's more and more coming out for disabilities and employability skills, but it's still kind of piecemealed. Everyone just kind of, gets stuff from different places. A lot of teachers and VR counselors and advocates for students with disabilities have to kind of go all over the place to find resources, to get them usable, to get them printed, all those things. So what we're hoping for with this BEST curriculum is that it will actually provide that for teachers and students in a setting in high school before they get to employment after graduation. Okay. What we also know is that self-determination is really broadly defined. And I want to say, okay, what we do know is in special ed and with TEA that self-determination is one of those ideas that students need to be taught, that we need to support our students with, in any way possible, with all kinds of technology, with all kinds of skills. Self-determination is important, but oftentimes we can't really even pinpoint what self-determination means. And after doing some digging, and I have to tell you, it was even interesting to see that if you go to like TEA website and look up self-determination, what you end up doing is getting routed to the expanded core curriculum, which is typically served for the blind or visually impaired students. And what we find is that it includes really a list of things, right? Choice making, decision making, problem solving, advocacy, assertiveness, and goal setting. And all of this sounds really great, but it's a lot, right? Like, what does that all actually mean? Like, what are we doing in classrooms that actually connects to these different topics? Is really, we can talk about choice making, decision making, problem solving, all these things forever, and really end up just having conversations. But we know that students who know and value who they are and have those determination skills really become advocates for themselves better than if someone's telling them what to do, right? And so we're hoping that we strengthen those skills early on so that students are able to really become their own advocates. With that said, we have some more kind of theory on self-determination. And really, again, these are all different aspects of it. Humans that are self-determined really they can master something themselves. They have that competence. They have control of their own life, or are able to make those decisions themselves. And we know that they can be related and experience something with other students and other people. But we know that with students with disabilities, it can get a little more difficult, right? It can come a little more, I guess, different in a sense, because now you have to really pinpoint how we're going to help students that are so diverse in their own way. Not to mention that we're often working with more than one student. Dr. Zhang, who is our director of our center, also did some research, and he knows that when it comes to practicing self-determination, there are a few simple things that he identified also, that it is important to, one, evaluate yourself, choose goals, take charge, and then of course, follow through and keep track of what you're doing. All of these things sound great when you're talking about them, right? All of it sounds great. Yes, we know students need to do this. We know we need to do this. Even to this day, I have conversations and I think about, what do I want to do when I grow up? Eventually I'll grow up, right? And I was like, wow, like maybe these are conversations that just don't need to be happening now, or that we know don't just need to happen when you're a junior or senior in high school, but really need to be happening often. We also know that, and I wanted to pull this up because sometimes we forget that even goals like self-determination can be placed in IEP goals, are very specific or can be written out to be very specific, we have opportunities to place those goals really in something that is not just a goal that can be checked off, but really something that can be practiced and practiced right throughout the school year. All to say though, that when it comes to self-determination, and we kind of already mentioned this, there are 7 kind of elements to self-determination. And what I want to do is go through each of them and give you all just an example of how we could do that in a classroom. And during, as I'm going through these different kind of slides, think about maybe some additional ways that you all have seen self-determination being done in the classroom, or when you're working with a student one-on-one or in a small group. And hang on to that thought, because in a minute, I'm going to open up the chat box for you all. And I would really like to get some more ideas going for us, really just to consider fast ways or even more consistent ways to practice self-determination that is really going to be helpful for everybody. So we have 7 different, like I said, just kind of elements of self-determination. One of the things, for example, let's start with choice making. It's very easy to give a student 2 or 3 options when you can. Give options to students, right? Would you like to get your 5-minute break before you begin your assignment, during your assignment, or free time afterwards? Really providing choice is really empowering, right? For me, I use this a lot with my child even, but it always has to do with snacks because it always has to do with the food. It's like, do you want your food now or while you're working? Because, I have to, sometimes work with him in those kind of restraints. But providing choice is really helpful and really important. Decision making. I like to provide examples a lot that are going to be related to work, because we do know that's one of our main goals, is really to provide students some skills that is going to connect them to being successful at work. I thought about this, like, if you're running late and, kind of posing this question, if you're running late to work, but you notice it's raining, right? And you don't have your umbrella, do you, keep going, or do you work, go back home and get it back to your car? These kind of things, it might seem like they're really simple questions, but if you think about, adding them to situations at work or work related, then all of a sudden it becomes kind of an important conversation to have, like there are some really interesting implications. Like if you show up to work really wet and, all frazzled, or if you take just a few minutes to go back and get an umbrella, each of those things can have an impact on your day or your work. And so having students work through those and talk about that is really important. Another example, problem solving. One of the things that we do within the curriculum is we do something like the STEP problem solving method. It is probably one of the best strategies out there. And again, it's something, you say the problem, you think of the solutions, you explore consequences, and you pick the best solution. Now, I'm going to stop here, because one of the things that even as a former educator that I'm thinking of when I see this kind of thing is that all these are really great examples, right? Great things. But the one thing that no one gives us is more time to do them, right? All of these things take time. And I wanted to stop because recognize that I understand that. One of the hardest things is that the conversations and the lessons that are the most impactful to our students are the ones that take a lot of time. And so thinking through the next examples, I really want us to start talking about ways to do this in a way that is fast and efficient, and really also then taking the pressure off of VR counselors and educators, because it is so much, right? And so trying to tweak our practice so that we're not just floundering in conversation that might not be going anywhere. When students need really long thinking times, it can get really frustrating, right? When you're trying to have this conversation and trying to hit these goals and trying to hit these objectives. And really what our students really just need is processing time, right? So let's think about that also, recognizing that, yes, those are some of the issues that we have as really advocates for students in transition, because no one's adding time to our day, right? Like there will never be 28 or 36 hours to a day, and definitely not at school. We also have something like goal setting, SMART goals. I recently had a conversation with a teacher, a high school teacher that was field testing our best curriculum, that mentioned how she had never, the SMART goal lesson really took a long time because it was so involved. And, the rest of us were talking about how I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with SMART goals. I'm starting to see more and more that the setup of SMART goals, like, being specific, measurable, doing all the kind of setting up all the letters, being achievable, realistic, timely. Yes, it takes a long time, but even in my workplaces, I'm starting to see it as being common conversation. So we talked a lot about how, and even high school, yes, I understand where this might be a really long activity to do, like identifying it and adding, realistic, the time, all of that. But the truth is, if our goal is to get our students into jobs and working and eventually advancing in their job, this is a very common language, and that people are talking about, on social media, in different resources. There's lots and lots and lots out there about it. Self-advocacy. We also talk about, for example, if we were to break a class into small groups and provide them with a list of community issues, how could you get students to come up with a plan on how to make a change? Now, this kind of, self-advocacy becomes really interesting when students are able to talk about advocating for a group, and then you're able to make connections with, not only you're advocating for a group, but you're advocating for yourself. And so that kind of practice becomes important also. Again, takes time. Self-management, something that we are working on now, is revising our the best curriculum that has a whole bunch of these work skills, and to providing something that is more easily accessible and almost like consumable for our students and our teachers. It's kind of like having students create a checklist of things that they need to do, either an assignment or at a job, before jobs, while they're at work. And a lot of you might use checklists a lot. I use checklists like every single day. It might look like a bunch of Post-it notes on my desk. It might look like my grocery list. Or it might look like my dream list. But checklists are actually, really easy to do. And the more our students practice using them, the more it actually helps them self-manage. So not so much something that a checklist for an assignment in class, but maybe a checklist for something that they have to do daily, and depending on what skill they're working on, right? And the last example I wanted to share is that of self-awareness. My mind, keeping in mind that all of these things bring up or allow us to practice self-determination. So it's not just one single skill. It really is kind of like the intersectionality of all of these things coming together and practicing them, right? So something like self-awareness, you talk about basic emotions, and we talk about how they manifest, right? We have anger, fear, happiness, sadness. Allowing students to write down one or two things or situations that they already know would cause them to feel that way. I know for me, I know that if I listen to music, it makes me happy, even if it's like not the happiest music. At least I know I get happier. Some students are the opposite. Some students don't want any kind of sound, right? Don't want anything and prefer it silent, and that's how they get happy, or at least calm. Or so really be allowing students to, again, we talk about like take time to reflect on what they're thinking and what they want, and really kind of generating good point, Sam. Yes, also how medication makes them feel, and the time of day, right? It's it amazes me how people are there are times when people do not feel comfortable talking about medication and the impact it has on students. How when they want to eat, when they don't want to eat, and medication really does impact their processing, right? If they need an extra hour in the morning, maybe to let that impact them a little better, or if you know what I mean. So absolutely, I agree. That is a big part of it also. So at this point, I wanted to stop and not just, see if y'all have questions, but also let you all throw in some ideas also of some other ways that you have seen or practiced or noticed that really lets people, or students practice self-determination, right? Like allowing them to, um, for it to be consistent, and that it maybe doesn't take as much time as I'm alluding to, because I can imagine that in one given day, if I'm in a classroom, I probably won't be able to hit all 7 areas of self-determination at one point. Participation in their art, absolutely, in their IEPs and their art meetings, absolutely. Allowing students to say for themselves what they would like to do, what they want to work on, maybe for them to decide or to express how successful they have been throughout the year, or if they've even had time to practice on those things, also becomes really important. Experiential learning as well. It really also, the more opportunities and experiences we can provide our students, the better. Of course, this past year has been crazy to decide on, right? Like there's no telling what, Sam, I'm going to pick on you until you just start talking to me instead of just if, how they learn. It helps with how we can, absolutely. It also, one of the things I remember doing a lot is being able to spend time with students at the beginning of the school year when you're kind of creating that classroom culture. It becomes really different though when you're a VR counselor or when you're supporting them, not at the very, you don't get a hold of them those first few weeks of school or whatever, and you're having to start serving them, later in the school year, right? You lose a lot of that extra time to work with students. And by all means, I know I'm not trying to, take control of this conversation. If you all are welcome to jump in, and we have a smaller group, so if y'all would like to add to the conversation, by all means. Deciding on accommodations, yes. And really just giving them more experiences as we can really helps. Have you all noticed in the past year with COVID, I know a lot of us struggle with those experiential learning, but is there anywhere where maybe that was heightened because of COVID, and maybe the technology helped in that sense? I do know that the opportunities were a little different with COVID. And of course, now we're probably going to move into this next school year pretending like it never happened. But has anyone run into any opportunities that were kind of a little different with COVID? Oh no, or not. And if you think of something, by all means, please interrupt and we can talk about that. Yes.
Well, I was going to add, this is Sam, that
Sam.
I kind of go on both sides with self-determination. I have my older son has ADHD, dyslexia on the 504 plan, and I'm also in education, and I work with self-determination for the districts here in Region 20, to where I think for my son, who I've worked very well with self-determination on him, he was able to kind of figure out strategies that worked for him, that could help him. He was able to ask more questions. One of the things I saw him do when we're all working from home, he was doing school from home, was using his cell phone. I heard him say probably about 6 times a day, "Hey Siri, how do you spell?" And he'd use certain things that he would figure out to help him, knowing he needed the help. I think in working with my son and just in my experience, self-determination is more the internal feeling of, hey, I don't get it. Hey, I kind of need help. Hey, I'm not sure what's going on, which then leads to self-advocacy of asking for that help. So I thought some of the things we think about with COVID, I think some of the kids that had those self-determination skills could kind of help themselves a little more than students that couldn't, or students that still needed that support, or students that were unsure of themselves. So I think a lot of it with self-determination is you might be unsure, but you're kind of like, well, I don't care, I'm gonna ask anyways because I don't get it. And so that's part of it, is having that kind of confidence, in a sense, of understanding this. I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but this to me leads to where students knowing and understanding they have a disability. If they know their strengths of that disability, then they know what they can ask for. If they don't know the strengths, they might not know what to ask for. And that's a big piece of that also, is doing that part. And that's what I talked about with the medication, because my son actually had a reaction to his medication and he knew he didn't feel right. He's like, hey, I don't, I'm having these, my brain doesn't feel right, which led us to talking to this pediatrician, which helped with the medication. So by kids understanding that part of them, I think it helps lead to them to being able to advocate for themselves, because it's hard to advocate. You don't know what you're advocating for.
Right.
And I think that's where the self-determination comes in, is kind of having that understanding of knowing the why of internally. So
Right.
that's a big piece of how that part is that I kind of talked about. But I think during COVID, if you had that, whether you're virtual or not, you could still ask for help. You know what I mean? You could still
Right.
kind of, in a sense, help yourself a little bit as much as you could.
Right. And the assumption that asking for help necessarily didn't need to mean asking a teacher for help during online learning, but students figuring it out on their own how to get stuff done, right? Like you said, like, using their phones, utilizing different technology, practicing those things, and then recognizing then where there might be gaps where the teacher's supporting them or not supporting them. I think that's, for me, I know my son's a little younger, and I was the opposite. I was like, I need him to go to school so that he can learn some of those skills more, because I knew that he would learn that better with a classroom dynamic. And it also has to do, of course, with his age. Absolutely. We are going to talk about it a little bit, because that also does come up in our best curriculum, what you were talking about, Sam. Anybody else have anything to add? I definitely don't want to deny anybody opportunity. One of the things that we have been working on is, of course, our best curriculum. We have worked at this point. We went through a round of field testing in the spring. We are in the process of still collecting data from our schools and our students and our educators. When we started talking about self-determination, one of the things that, and what Sam said also, is, that self-determination almost becomes like this intrinsic kind of sense about a student that develops over time. But at some point, it very much is about a student identifying and recognizing when they're going to ask, how they're going to ask, and really providing those opportunities, but then also allowing students to know that they have there's a safe environment for that, right? There's an ability for them to do that. When we started looking at our curriculum, let me just share real quick. And this has not been widely shared, because we are very much still in the process of revising it. One of the things, so the curriculum is divided into 4 different units, right? We start with personal needs, we go to employment preparation, we go to professionalism, and then we have career development. The curriculum itself is set up for educators and VR counselors and even VAT teachers or whoever utilizes it to use it as they see fit. So whether you do unit 4 first or 3 or 2, it doesn't matter. But we do feel that there is a natural progression with starting with personal needs and, of course, moving on to career development. But we also recognize that with in the spring, for example, we got it into the classrooms later than we wanted. And a lot of teachers had already gone through a lot of like personal needs, for example. But then they were able to then utilize a curriculum as they needed for their students. What you'll also see then, that self-determination, the same kind of conversations we had, or the same areas we talked about earlier, is very much spread out throughout the whole curriculum. So we don't just talk about self-determination in unit 1, or just at the very end, as we're talking about career development. Self-determination and that skill building really does happen throughout the whole curriculum, so that students are getting that practice and that kind of that immersion of what it means to decide for yourself and then act on it throughout the whole curriculum. There are about 27 lessons at this point. We are going to do, I can say, a major revision, mostly because a lot of it has to do with the layout, but the content of itself, it looks to be pretty solid. What you see, of course, is, and you can just see here real quick, from effort and perseverance to self-determination when it comes to self-awareness and self-advocacy. We do have a lesson in there about recognizing and kind of knowing about your own disability and being able to ask for help as you see fit, and also revealing what you want about your disability and how that plays into the workplace. So just know that this part really got me excited when we started talking about self-determination, and we started kind of pulling out those lessons that we knew would really go into him. I was really happy to see that there was like, clearly it goes through the whole curriculum. See where we at? Okay. To give you another example, now I pulled out, I think, 3 examples. I wanted you to see what it looks like. This is a left page and a right page, and really gives you an idea of what the lessons look like. We have the power of positive attitude. We start off the lessons with, objectives, vocabulary words, and then we go into some of the content. And so there's really a lot of opportunity within the lessons as we flesh them out, that we have different discussion points, different activities. There are small assessments embedded, and there's really just kind of like those short little conversation opportunities that we tend to have, limited time for. Here's another lesson about self-awareness and self-advocacy. Again, I think this is the one I pulled. Yeah, that talks about IDEA and Section 504, and really just starts allowing students to take in kind of some of that, even that legal standing about their disability, starting to understand, like when they do go into the workplace, when do you ask about, your disability? When do you ask about your supports? When do you have to ask about your supports? If someone, excludes you from something because of your disability, what do you do? And so it allows students to really just start talking about it, because this is one lesson that can be really overwhelming. And from when we talked about a number of educators, we learned that this is another one that takes time. But it's also one of those lessons that's really important for us to talk about, because a number of students will be in those ARDs and those IEP meetings and will not have a clue what their disability is. And so that doesn't help when they're about to graduate and they're going to, as adults, and end up in a workplace where by law they have rights as well and have protections that no one really ever mentioned to them. So that's a really hard thing to learn and to kind of manage when you're, a young adult, along with all the other things that are going on. Another example we see on Unit 4 towards the end is learning and exemplifying employers' expectations. Also learning some of those common business practices that aren't just, job specific, that a teacher's aide or a teacher or a fast food worker, or any specific job is then it's really some of these skills that kind of go across all jobs, some of those soft skills that we talk about. And what does it mean to, meet your employer's expectations versus your own expectations, and how we learn from that. These are things that I practice every day in my own work. And it really allows students to start talking about these things earlier rather than later in their own educational and then, of course, work experiences. So one of the things I want to mention as we kind of wrap up, because I know this is a lot of information, it's really just a lot of like little ideas. And I do invite you to look back on this and kind of think about ways to add this to your own kind of toolbox. One of the things I noticed early on is that it's really important to keep things as simple as possible, because things are really complicated as it is. And this wasn't one of my bulletin boards. It gives you an idea of how I used to work. I used to keep things as simple as possible. Like I always was a color coding person. Bulletin boards are really important for me, as simple as possible. If you have opportunities to have a bulletin board, I know inclusion or especially education teachers who have space can put up information, but if there's a way for you to put up information on a wall so that students can look at and think about consistently, that helps a lot, because otherwise we just don't have time in the day to have these conversations every day. But if you allow them to have that time to think and plan on their own, it really helps. One of the things I learned also is that providing short but directed opportunities is really important, because we will have those kind of lingering conversations about anything, and that at some point it just doesn't help when we're just kind of waiting. So providing short opportunities, sometimes if it seems acceptable, using timers and like those old school like cooking timers was always really fun and helpful for me, because it at least forced you to think fast as you could and then you move on. I'm really big on protecting time to think and process things. It's a really good idea to ask some of these things right as you're leaving class or right as you're finishing with a student, and allowing students that processing time to come back and think about things, plan things out, dream, want things, and then come back at a later time. So I've always wanted to like give you like 2 or 3 questions before you leave, and then we can start a conversation next time with those things. Another example I wanted to share with y'all too was practicing 3 times. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference and I watched 2 presenters do this activity with a number of students. These were actually college students, but were juniors and seniors. And even if you ask juniors and seniors in college, what do you want to do when you grow up? They sometimes answer like me, and it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And it's kind of shocking, right? With these, about to graduate from college and they have no idea what they want to do. But these presenters, it was really awesome to see. They asked, we were in a small group, and this one young lady volunteer, she was so brave. And, they asked her what she wanted to do. The first time around, she kind of thought about it, kind of talked, kind of added a whole bunch of extra stuff, was saying the ums and the uhs. We stopped, and then he asked the same people again, okay, now tell us again what you want to do. And she went through it again, and then they asked her to do it one more time. And again, right, like this all takes a lot of time. But I was amazed at watching this young lady really transform as she did this a first, second, and third time, because as she went along, her confidence grew. She was standing taller. By the third time, she wasn't using those ums and pauses and, her hands awkwardly. She was very clear on what she was saying. She used less words. She was very direct, and it really amazed me. And the whole thing probably took about 5 minutes. And so for me as an educator, I remember, and I still think about it and I talk about it, because it was so powerful for me to say that, yeah, we talk about it. Yeah, practice. But for us to actually sit there, and the 2 presenters like, no, you're going to do it again. So instead of someone else going, no, it's like the same person do it again. And I was just amazed at really how refined her speech got, right? And so I imagine if we provide those kind of examples more and more often throughout the school year, really how confident our students get, right? Because it's the same thing. I'm asking you to do the same thing. I'm asking you to, I'm not asking you to think about something else. Just practice. And so that's something that always sticks in my mind, not just the practice, but really about, okay, take a moment, get out all the extra stuff, the cobwebs, and now let's try it again. And it really helped a ton. And so I add that in every time I talk about really any kind of these skills. Course number 4, offer choices. And this is amazing, offering choices. And as an educator, and as a counselor, you can provide those choices to kind of like, guide as needed. But when you're talking about students from all kinds of backgrounds and exceptionalities and disabilities, offering choice helps students that are both gifted in the high IQ range to even your students that, have multiple disabilities that struggle in the classroom. So providing choice really allows them to even kind of practice those self-determination. And then you ask them why they chose that, right? Again, of course, takes a little bit more time, but you eventually get to know your students more and understand why they're making the choices they are making. And then we can kind of support them along the way as well. And then, of course, the last one of, more time, but really digging deep and always asking why they want to do something, or, why not to sound abrasive, but it really gives students the opportunity to explain themselves and to learn as an educator what you're not doing to support their needs, really makes a difference. So I'm going to stop there. Hold on, let me look over here. Okay, so, and I knew this was going to happen, right? This is really exciting. The best curriculum we think is really close. I believe, I can't tell you anything else beyond that, mostly because we are so knee deep in data right now and revisions. I do know that we will have it soon. I'm going to share with you my email address in just a second, because I want you all to know that if you email me and let me know, I will also keep you in mind as more opportunities come up within the next few months. Dr. Zhang and I really need to sit down and this timeline of, with COVID and everything, and, of course, the summer doesn't last 3 months. It really lasts about 3 weeks. So by the time we need to get everything rolling again, please know that all of you that are interested, we want to make sure that you all will be the first ones to know about what's happening and opportunities that come up. And by opportunities, I mean, like, we are tapping into you all as stakeholders and as experts in the field also to provide some feedback and additional information for us as needed. Me as a former educator, that is my biggest and most important, I guess, not pet peeve, but important thing for me to hold on to, is that yes, the research portion of it is critical, but at the end of the day, the end product needs to be something that is usable and efficient and effective for our students. So just know, and I can go ahead and just add that right now. There'll be 4 units to address. Yes, 4 units, 27 lessons right now. It's really lengthy, but what we are working on now is also providing different modes of it. We want to design like not just a text and a workbook. That's what we have now. We have a text and a workbook, but also provide like PowerPoints for teachers so that you all can work through it as needed. Just now I wanted to share with this last slide. We're in the middle of data collection right now. We are still in the process of working with our educators with interviews and focus groups who went through the curriculum. We will be revising the curriculum within the next few months. And of course, we're going to be adjusting the timeline for when the curriculum will be released to educators. Ideally, we will be creating like this innovative course. Even if you go to innovative courses now, TEA courses, all you see is the course, and then of course just a list of references or resources. That's pretty much what you will see. But we hope to really expand that and provide, a curriculum that could easily take 1 semester, but just as easily can take a whole year, depending on how the different programs work. We have a lot of 18+ programs. We understand that special education in itself looks different in every corner of Texas, and we completely recognize that. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. Also say, really that those skills, those self-determination, and all those 7 kind of topics we talk about are very much embedded into that curriculum. And there's so much more in there. That is pretty much the gist of it at this point. Like I said, we were able to field test with the curriculum and the workbook. And we will be having hopefully some opportunities, because for me, I know that, and our research team, that really your all's feedback is what's really important when it comes to our students, and really going back and reflecting on what we've learned through the past year. So I'm definitely taking note of what Sam talked about with, kind of utilizing things on your own. There's definitely a place for that, to add that in the curriculum as well. Oh, good point. Thank you, Veronica. That is something that we have talked about. One of the things that I can add also is that we did launch this with a component for a virtual experience. We do know that at this point, the the text of the curriculum is still a little heavy, it's a little wordy, and it's a little advanced, that there are plans to revise that to allow for modifications and adaptations for students as they need it. We are also going to provide that support online. One of the things we noticed right after we launched it is because it was so wordy. And of course, students of all disabilities were experiencing this. It is designed for all students. What we did immediately is we added audio to our online experience. It was on Canvas for this past year, and we felt that the audio helped a lot for students who could then hear it, and then teachers who would want to manage it in their classrooms, not necessarily reading it, presenting it, but allowing students to, experience it in the classroom. So there's going to be some options also that we are working on. No. Are there any other questions? I know that gets really exciting.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I have an 18+ program.
Mhm.
So we teach employability skills. Of course, they're adults and we're trying to get them job ready. And so we're always trying to dig and search for things that we can teach that's relative to trying to get them jobs. So we know that they need the interviewing skills, and we do work closely with Texas Workforce, and they do have some program and curriculums that we do borrow. But I thought this was interesting because it's targeted towards specifically students with disabilities. But what we deal with is, if they apply at HEB expects them to participate in the interview just like a regular person would. And so coaching them and training them on that, I think that that's important. And looking at this curriculum here, I was looking at, where they have, they identify their disability, but I think for me, it's not so much identifying what they have, but it's all connected to how do you present yourself to work? If you, have an obstacle, how do you deal with that? And I think within this curriculum, what would work for us and would be user-friendly is that there's some active links or something that doesn't require so much on the teacher preparation, because, looking and to me, I mean, it's just, my observation, the lessons do look a little bit, your lessons under the units look a little bit too wordy to where any educator would pick it up and say, because we all want user-friendly. We all want to be able to say, if you gave me links to address employment preparation or what is professionalism, and you have a little video clip of it. So we can, it's just more user-friendly, I think. The other thing is maybe creating an email account, because what we're discovering is that our students have a district email, but it doesn't mean anything when they leave here, but yet they apply for a job under the district email that's obsolete when they're gone. So we have to say, how are you going to maintain this? We do portfolios to be able to present that to a job, because what if that job that we helped create and connect them to no longer keeps them? What is the next step? How are they going to advocate for another job, and how have we trained them and coached them on that? And that's just, what I think. And that's why I'm interested in this curriculum. But again, and my students are probably not, if they were at a high level, based on, my observation, then these students should be at the high school receiving the employability skills curriculum, even though they're LD or whatever, as the regular ed students are. So when we create something like the BEST that is more specific to the lower students, that we have to be kind of cognizant and aware that it has to be at that level for anybody to want to use it. I mean, that's just my observation.
No. And I thank you for that. So I was just able to share a few lessons. What I can tell you is that is very much a big part of our curriculum also, is the interviewing, the dressing for interviews, going through resumes. So all of those things are inclusive also with a number of links, videos. That's another thing we're going through also this summer, is making sure we're adding more, to your point, because we really, for those of us who don't have maybe the opportunity to do a lot of that one-on-one coaching for interviews, that's really what it is, right? Being able to go through and practice. Those are the things we're adding to some of those resources, and it is already in the curriculum. We do have a whole, lots of lessons, a number of lessons that talk about, your dress, how to work with coworkers, difficult people. Like, there's a number of lessons that all kind of go to your point, about really just practicing those things. So absolutely, and I want to say that we absolutely talk about having an email account, but I want to say that we do not mention that about when you finish high school. And you're absolutely right. Same with college, right? You can't really have unless you're going on and continuing it at that university, or I guess at that high school, you really can't. That email address becomes obsolete within a few months, right? So I think, because I will actually make sure that gets put in this summer, and really just practicing that, right? Maybe even going through a checklist, appropriate emails, what is not appropriate, right? Because that becomes another thing, experience. I know me and my colleagues and my friends, I should say, experience, because we grew up with the new round of email addresses, and some of my friends, I'm even going, wow, how did that still live? So absolutely, yes. And I would love to talk to you more about that. I know PSJA, you're right in our, my backyard from McAllen. So please let me know if you have more questions, because I would love to talk to you more about being able to, provide that for various students. Let me see.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm proud. Yes. Absolutely. And I definitely want to save this chat. So all of this is really great information. I do know that we are getting really close to finishing it. And yes, the curriculum is a start. We do know that there is, of course, in my mind, there's a ton of work to do on it, because modifying for different disabilities means, at the end of the day, providing choice for our students and our teachers, because I also know that it's really important to make things easier for our teachers to serve their students. I do want to point out real quick, we have, if you all do not know Amy Day, she is in our office and provides person-centered planning. Pay attention or take a look at our website, because she will be providing dates soon. And I think it is an amazing opportunity to learn more about self-determination through person-centered planning. I also want to mention that there is another training coming up on July 21st. With Intact and training on school-based enterprises. Their information is there as well. I see that Eric added the satisfaction survey and the information for this next training in the chat. So thank you, Eric. Finally, I added a number of resources for everybody that's available, on the PowerPoint when you're ready. And of course, the references to the, some of the more theoretical research things. So I am going to add, there is my email address, and I'm going to add it in the chat for you as well. If you all are interested in the BEST project and the research portion of it, please let me know, because I really would, y'all have some great ideas. And if you all even have questions or like Veronica, just input on that, I would really love, to talk to more of you all. There's opportunities coming up that we would be able to, kind of make sure some things are taken care of and are really included in that. And so I really appreciate your all's time. I want to respect your time also, and it is 2:00. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for this. It's great.
Thank you all so much. And all my Valley folks, you all enjoy, try to stay cool this summer. I
So
know
once
that.
again,
So-
thank you. Thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. Please complete the satisfaction survey for us, because once again, we really appreciate your feedback. And please register for the Intact training that we're having next month. I believe Eric uploaded the link to do so. So have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything else to add, Eric?
No, I don't. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate it.
All right, have a
Bye,
great
y'all.
day.
Thank you.